Hello, I'm Hazel Barron-Cooper, the Learning Officer at the Hatton Gallery, and I'm going to show you some simple techniques that you can use for illustration. So I'm going to show you now some simple ways with watercolour, how to use it. It's a beautiful medium, and I'm just using a tin paints you may already have at home as a sort of just a Reeves tin quality of paints. You can use anything you have to hand really for this one in water-based paint. Water, of course. I've got some I've got some salt, you can use any kind of salt, and I've got some wax which is from a candle. So brushes, not tiny little brushes, you needn't have huge ones either. This kind of size would be perfect for what we're doing today, but I'm just going to talk you through a few ways of using watercolour. So I think first of all, might be stating the obvious, but the best thing to do is to use watercolour paper like this. You can see the beautiful grain on it. This is rough, so you can get watercolour paper either smooth or rough. If you go for rough like this, you get that grained quality, which gives it this kind of flavour to it, which looks different to other ways you might use paint. If you use ordinary cartridge, or if you were to use printing paper, you will find the paper will bend and cockle, whereas with this it's fine to go on as it is. So the first principle of watercolour painting is, I'm going to use a brush with quite a good sized brush for this one, is to create a wash. So you don't really paint straight out of the tin, mixing the colours, you've got to create a wash. So to do that, get some water into the palette. I often use a plate, or this one's got a tin lid. I'm going to mix using blue, and this is quite a darker blue, this Prussian blue. And with watercolour, you need to clean your brush between obviously using colours to mix. And I'm going to use not black because that tends to deaden it a bit of brown, tiny bit of brown just to darken the blue a little bit more, and that will take the blue to a darker edge that I want. I'm going to make sure I've got plenty of this wash to show you, and I'm doing it in dark colour so you can see it clearly. So the principles of using watercolour is to create a good wash, which means you've got to start at the top here and work smoothly, kind of almost without stopping, right the way down. This is to avoid getting any sort of brush strokes in it. Keep going back to the wash you've created and go right the way down. So as I quite like the sort of not precisely defined edges that you get with it. Add a bit more water to that. So I keep on going, and you can see the effects on this paper just look quite nice to begin with without even doing anything. So that's the basis. It's to practice creating a wash like this, rather than laboriously painting a shape and you will get brush strokes in it you don't want to be in it. Sometimes you want brush strokes, sometimes you don't. Then you get this lovely smooth surface. One of the key things about watercolour that's wonderful to use is using it wet into wet. Now I'm going to do that over in this rectangle to give that time to dry. What you can do is first of all actually wet the paper with water all over before you begin to get the paint to flow in it. So you're just using what was a bit tainted already with the blue wash, but never mind, I'll just continue along. And at the top you can put in, let's say we'll put a red in and just let that red flow as it will. Beautiful. You can even encourage it to flow a bit. Then, we'll put an orange in, going through the colour spectrum maybe. An orange in next, in the band there, and that will flow either way. I'm letting it flow into the red and down the page as well. And finally, I'm going to put a yellow in, this bright lemon yellow, in the base, like this, and I'm just allowing this to run down, let it happen. This is if you're creating a pattern or a feeling for the text, you can coax it that way in this. You can go back and put a deeper red in to flow into the already red area and let that come down a bit. So that's one of the beauties of watercolour. It's you're controlling it, but it makes beautiful random gestural paint marks as you're creating it. Something else, a couple of other things you can do with it is, just rest my brush there, just using an ordinary candle like this. You can You could draw something with it, you can draw shapes with it, marks. I'll do a texture here going one way and the other. And then again I'll use a dark watercolour to show you. Again I'm going to mix like a Prussian blue, which is a dark bluey green, or a mid blue if you've got in your watercolour set, and again the brown rather than putting black in. I'm going to put quite a lot in, make some more intense colour just so you can see the resist. So this is called wax resist. I've already created the wax drawing if you like, and you could do that with anything. You'd write on it, you'd put a word. You can do it in coloured wax so you can actually see what you're doing, but in this instance I've used clear wax. And when I put the watercolour paint on top like this, the water resists where the wax is, and you can see the pattern emerging already. So you can use this to create textures, and try not to let it flow into this one next door. Down the bottom I did a sort of diagonal mesh of lines. There we are. So that's another way you can use it. So this is a wash. Straightforward wash using watercolour. This is wax resist. And this one's known as just wet into wet painting. Wet into wet. And with this you get beautiful colour combinations. And you can see watercolour is quite pale, so you have to sometimes leave it to dry. Totally leave it for about at least half an hour, and then go back and work back into it again. So I could go back into this one and put wax on top and then another colour on top. This is like pure, I actually really like this as it is, but work more on top of that. So that's just the basis of what you can do with watercolour. So I'll just take that away, put it to the side. I'll show you simply, just taking my paper, yeah. So I'll show you how to draw an object. So we have a simple sphere like this. What I'll do first of all with the whole area, already my water's getting a bit murky, might have to change it soon, I'll use this one, is paint the whole area with water. Now assuming what this ever may be, it could be a fruit, it could be a planet, it could be anything, sphere in its own right. I've got that, the light will be hitting one side of it, so again I'll just demonstrate using blue so you can see it clearly. So I want this area to be left white, which is a key factor in watercolour, that some bits are left as bare paper. I'm going to flood this in, see what happens. There we go, leave that a bit, and just allow it to flow in this area over here, like that. And I love these marks as the medium spreads into the water. Just allow that to happen, maybe encourage it a little bit. So I've got the basis here with the light hitting this side, darkness on that side. Perhaps it would, cast a shadow on this side. That's the first stage. Leave it to dry totally. And that's what I did about 10 minutes ago. So now that's totally dry, and we've got the white area left, which is what I want. I quite like the effect here. Need to darken it. Now to darken, watercolour relies on, if you think of one layer of tissue paper on top of another, it's about one wash on top of another, accumulating in a sort of beautiful colour at the end of it. So I might put on 5 washes to get the desired colour. Now this I want it to be more purpley, so I'm not going to put purple on it. I could mix purple, but I'm going to put this red on. Again, I'm going to put a bit of water on first over here, because I want the darker area which looks slightly red, purplish, so I'm going to apply that and put that on top, and just allow it to flow as I'm controlling it. So it's a mixture of controlling it and allowing the paint to move around as well while you coax it along. Quite like that. Don't like that very severe piece there, so I'm going to get a bit of tissue, kitchen roll, just dab that there a little bit. That's better. I like that, so it gradually goes Now when that's drier, I could go back and put a darker wash in here, and I'll just do that. So that'd be best if I'd left it for about 10 minutes, but let's go back in again, your Prussian blue there, around this edge to make it darker, let it flood in. So this is extreme wet into wet. Just coax it around there, because I want that to be the darker side. And look how that's flowing beautifully into the rest of the paint. I'll hold it up. Let's flow down a bit. You can see how that paint is moving along. You can coax it and make it move in different directions. And you could build, so then you would leave that again for another 10 or 15 minutes till it's totally dry, till you put another layer on. So I've done that with a simple circle. You could do it with anything. It could be abstract patterns, leaf shapes, anything you want that complements and enhances your poetry. Something else you could do with, I'll just show you a few more ideas inspired by text as well. So there's that word cumulus I used earlier in a previous video. I'm going to just swap my water now to get it cleaner again. You must keep doing that, or else you end up painting with very dark water all the time. It doesn't quite work. You don't get your clean colours. So for this, I'm going to use, I want it for this obviously a cloud-like effect, so I'm going to paint the surrounding area with water, just flood it around here. I'm going to just flood this whole piece. I'm not going to go right to the edge because I want it to kind of end naturally, the way that water does and the way the cloud does. So the paint emulating the thing that you're painting. I'm going to, there, and I think before I apply the paint I'm going to put some cloud-like, some flowing marks on in wax. Sorry, in other parts over here where I haven't got water. And I'm going to apply that quite quickly. I'm going to get it fairly dark. There we go. Let it flow around again. I quite like how the edge of the paper looks like a cloud now because it's got that ridge of colour on it. Go across there with this blue, let it flood in. Allow it to flood down like this. See at the bottom edge how it's flooding and the natural flow of the water, which is quite beautiful. I'll go down that way. And then you could use a scrunched up bit of paper towel again to get effects like this here. And then you can also use this salt. I use this coarse sea salt to great effect, but in the house you may just have any ordinary salt you can use. Get that out. Pour it into the very, very wet water. You must do it straight away. It doesn't work if you leave it. And each grain of salt will absorb the water around it. So you'll end up with wherever the salt is, you'll get little sort of speckled marks where it had once been. Yeah, so you have to put that, with watercolour you've got to be quite patient. You've got to put that to one side now, leave it to dry for quite a long time because it's got the salt on, maybe in 1 hour. Then brush the salt off, and then you can add more to it with another layer. So watercolour is about layer upon layer upon layer to get the desired effect. Swap that now for one using the word. So the colours are inspired by the word, they inform and enhance the word. Again, I'm going to put work in wax first of all, and I'm thinking of grassland and blowing and wind, and I'm putting strokes all over surrounding the word in wax. Then I'm going to get some burnt sienna, mix it in the palette. Remember, very rarely take it directly from the paint, the palette itself. It's always mixed first. I'm going to put this, and then I'm going to, yeah, I do want the paper wet a bit first because I like the colour to flow. Put it over this area. And I think as you're doing this, it might inspire you to think of even more words to describe the, whatever it is you may be writing about. So this is quite bright. I'm going to let that flood in there, suggesting colour from the landscape. There we are. And I'm going to, while that's still wet, that burnt sienna brown, which is like an orangey brown, and the white's showing up quite nicely. I'm going to mix a dark green. I can't see a green I like in the palette, so I'm going to quickly wipe away some of this from here. I'm going to make a green using this existing quite dark green. There we are, with some more blue added to it. Yeah, I quite like that petrol colour sort of colour. I'm going to put that in here and there. Again, I'm doing it mostly, this has got a few brush strokes I'm applying, but still realise not on having like the washed area. I want that to be slightly darker, so I'll add more blue to it. Have pockets over here of the darker colour. So with watercolour, you've got to work quite quickly. If I leave this to dry at all, it just won't work. You've got to always have a plan in mind of sort of effect you want to achieve and then go for it. I'm going to put some sort of different types of mark as well, dotted around. And I think I need, over here, I want some darker brown, so I've gone in with it there, dark. And there we are. I like it. I like the way this is going at the moment, so add a bit of dark to this area. So balancing the marks, I can see the colours. I could use a bit of tissue again to come in and take certain marks off and on. I can add a bit of salt again. To get texture to it. More. So that would then be left to dry, and that would be the first layer of the piece. So then, I hope you've enjoyed. I'll just recap again. We've got the basic. Practice this first, maybe on a bit of paper, but do try and get watercolour. It does work on quite strong cartridge. It does not work on standard printing paper. It would just be no good. Obviously buy it from, send away from the internet, or buy it. A few art shops are open at the moment. You can get it at. So there's this method. Then if you remember, we created a, look at the two of them, the first stage and the second stage. That one's working quite nicely now. With the red's become, I applied red on there, but it does read as purple because the colour mixes optically and you read it as a purple. I would go on with that, building up more and more different colours. And then I could surround it with a dark colour and it would give it a different atmosphere altogether. And then we've got the two words, cumulus. I'll just see how this is coming along. It's only been done for a few minutes, but not quite ready. You can get sort of an idea if you take some of the salt off. Now we're getting these texture marks in this area, but it's blurring. But if you leave that for a couple of hours, you get nice marks. And there we have those two. So I hope that's given you some good ideas about how to illustrate your poetry.